Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as it is turning a lot colder as we head through the next 24 hours, as we do see some really quite potent northerly winds arriving from the Arctic. Fortunately, it's not going to last all too long, and by the end of the weekend, the start of next week, it should slowly turn milder from the west once again. And actually, as we head into next week, it might actually be pretty mild, upper temperatures being well above average instead. Precipitation is a little bit up and down. It does look fairly dry the next couple of days with the cold, dry air around, but it will increase next week when that milder, more humid air does return. Now, if you look after that at the longer range charts, we'll be able to see that things are very interesting as we head into the middle to second half of October. There is a bit of a battle going on, perhaps between high pressure to our east, low pressure to our west, and it could put up a big dividing wall where it is milder, warmer perhaps, and drier in the east and south, wetter and cooler in the north and west, closer to the Atlantic lows. Now, it is still quite a distance away that arriving. We've just got to contend with all the cold air coming in over the coming days, but we are seeing pretty strong trends for that in that longer range. And as I said, it could bring a big divide into the middle portion of October. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. Now, if you start on the live radar, we've got a lot going on in northern and western Europe. Now, of course, we have got Hurricane Milton, major Hurricane Milton, that is arriving for Florida in the coming hours. Again, do check out my video I posted earlier on that, again, mostly looking at the meteorological side of it. But we've got another ex-tropical system over here in northwest Europe. This is ex-Hurricane Kirk, which you can see is smashing parts of France at the moment. Now, of course, we posted a lot about this in the past sort of week to 10 days, as originally the track was passing through southern England, but luckily it has adjusted much further southwards, and you can see it is really smashing parts of northern France, and you can see how we are very, very lucky to have missed this. As you can see, it could have been a really quite horrific event for parts of England and Wales if this had arrived on our shores. Luckily, it is across France, but even there, still some quite severe impacts. The winds are starting to die down now as it is over land, but still lots of very heavy rain associated with this. And you can see that with this big wall of rain through much of northern and western Europe at the moment. Now, we are just off the periphery of that heavy rain, and you can see for much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland and Scotland, with bits and bobs of rain around, as we are still generally under lower pressure. But you can see the overall trend is for this large area of low pressure, which contains the remnants of Kirk, to move eastwards, unlocking the door to northerly winds. And that's what you can see here across northern Scotland. We transition from more cloudy, showery pattern to a colder, drier, but still with some convective showers pattern across Scotland. And this is that very cold air moving in, and you can see snow is falling in some of these showers over the higher ground. Again, not too unexpected for this time of year, but just shows you that is where the divide is. Cold across Scotland at the moment, recording this around 7 p.m, but much milder to the south of this rain. This is where the dividing line is, the weak weather front that is slowly transitioning us from milder Atlantic air to cold Arctic air. And we see that on the 2-meter temperatures this evening, still very mild across much of northern Europe. You can see how there is some very warm air wrapped up in Kirk, affecting the south, to the south of the weather fronts, where the warm sector is here. It's 20 degrees, 25 degrees perhaps in places. And to the north of that, we are in Atlantic air. But look at Scotland, getting much, much colder at the moment, and that is slowly spreading southwards over the coming hours. And for all through Thursday, it is going to feel very cold indeed. And temperatures at the surface will be down a good 6 to 8 degrees widely. Now, if you go over to the latest UKV and have a look at that in detail, you can see the rain clearing away through the rest of this evening, and you can eventually see those northerly winds properly pushing in with a bit of snow for the Highlands of Scotland as we head into the early hours of Thursday. Now, through much of Thursday, because that air is cold and the dew points are very low, we're actually not going to see much in the way of rain. We're not going to see much in the way of cloud, and actually going to be pretty pleasant out there. When we get some of these cold air masses coming directly in from the north, if we can avoid instability, as we don't really have many features within this flow, it actually is really quite nice in terms of sort of the photogenics. It's sunny, it's dry, it's quite pleasant. Just the caveat is it's going to feel very cold with a fairly strong northerly flow. So yeah, looks nice out there, but it will feel very cold, so make sure you wrap up warm, especially early in the mornings and late in the evenings. As we head into Friday, you can already see the wind direction starting to slowly shift back to more of a westerly flow, but it's a very slow transition, so actually the cold air hangs on for another couple of days. So yes, so I'll see a bit of transition, a bit more cloud coming into the north and west, but for most it's going to remain very cold on Friday with frosts potentially into Saturday as well. Eventually you can see some more lower pressure starting to nudge in, but it's really only for northern and western parts, southern parts still in the cold air, and there is a bit of a potential of maybe some more significant snowfall over the highlands of Scotland there, with a bit more substantial precipitation bumping into that cold air. Again, don't think anything major, but first time this sort of autumn we'll potentially see some proper snowfall instead of just convective showers. Again, not too unusual over the highest ground, but I did just want to point that out. Now into the weekend, the real transition will come Saturday into Sunday, where we slowly push away that colder air, and you can see that with that thick cloud pushing in. That's the milder, more humid air with all that high level cloud. And then you can see into Sunday, weather front starting to push in off the Atlantic. Nothing too bad if we're being completely honest, just a slow transition to something more normal for the time of year with a westerly flow. And you can see that from the upper air temperatures, very cold through much of Wednesday, Thursday into Friday, and eventually as we head into the weekend, still chilly on Saturday, but turning much milder as we head into Sunday and Monday. Temperatures back towards average and will trend above average into the following week. Now if you look at the max temperatures, you can see this afternoon temperatures touching 16, 17 in the south, pretty mild for the time of year, a good few degrees above average, much colder across Scotland. But it is turning much colder for all, and through the early hours of Thursday, we're actually going to see a frost for many parts of Northern England, Scotland, Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland as that cold air pushes in. Even for southern areas, it's not going to be a frost potential. There's no chance here, with temperatures still sort of 6 to 10 degrees, but it is going to feel a lot colder, and those temperatures won't rise much during the day. And you see by Thursday afternoon, we're looking at maxes of around 6 to 12 degrees, with 12 degrees being right along the south coast, and it's being single digits for many areas further north. So very cold, and again, that doesn't even add on the wind chill, which will make it feel a good few degrees colder than this. Similar story into Friday, frosts where we have clearer skies even across southern England, and you see again temperatures struggling in the day. Slightly milder as we do slowly see the potency of the cold air mass wear off, but still only just about getting into the double digits. Same could be said for Saturday, frosts again where we have clearer skies, and by the afternoon temperatures nudging slightly higher, more 13 or 14, and by Sunday temperatures are turning milder for all, maybe 14, 15, and you'd expect to see maybe 15, 16, 17 maybe on Monday as those temperatures start to nudge above average. Now if you look at the latest GFS, you can see the northerly wind coming in at the moment as we see Kirk clearing to our south and our east. That northerly wind holds on for the next couple of days. It's not a direct northerly the whole time, but at the moment it is, and that is what's bringing in that very cold air. It's a very slow transition back to a westerly flow, and that will only really push in for Sunday, as I said, and it's still under a bit of higher pressure, so it's drier for the time being. It's really in sort of Tuesday, Wednesday where we start to see this battle sort of taking off. High pressure to our east, Scandinavian high coming up against low pressure to our west. This sort of pattern here looks like high pressure wins, and it does go fairly dry, maybe a bit of a trough developing. Again, that could put a bit of a spanner in the works, but generally high pressure in control for the time being, for eventually low pressure winds out towards the end of the run, towards the end of October. But for the middle, for the 5, 6, 7 days of this period, high pressure with southeasterly winds winning, and that would be very warm and very dry, at least very warm for the time of the year. Again, if we put on the 2-meter temperatures for midday, we are looking at sort of mid to high teens, potentially maybe 17, 18 degrees at best, which again doesn't sound amazing, but for October, and we're getting into the second half of October here, that is pretty good, considering as we get into November, we start to see daytime highs of only the single digits for most areas. So yeah, pretty decent, not terrible from the GFS at all. Could be some rain around, but hopefully a bit of a drier pattern arriving for the middle of the month. We'll have to wait and see the exact details for that, but positive here from the GFS. Now, if you look at the GM, we can see perhaps a slightly different story. Again, very cold, same pattern over the next 4 or 5 days. Eventually, westerly flow pushes in, and yes, we do see that Scandinavian high building, but it's nowhere near as dominant as the GFS was showing. And yes, it does dominate further eastwards, but look at this big low out to our west keeps trying to push in, and you see it as a battle between high pressure to our east, dry conditions, and very wet conditions to our west. And this is where we could see the divide. Drier, warmer in the east, we see these milder air masses, slightly cooler and a lot wetter in the west. And you see temperatures here, similar, but again, it will be very dependent on precipitation amounts. So again, I wouldn't take these as gospel. If you look at the latest ECMWF as well, just to compare that, again, northerly wind over the coming days, pretty much exactly the same. And then as we head into next week, we do see that transition, high pressure to our east, low pressure to our west. And it really is a battle where it does look like low pressure wins out even further. That low pressure is even further in than the GM. And weather fronts will be crossing the country and making it much wetter indeed. So a much bigger battle there from the latest ECMWF. To finish, if we look at the latest ensembles, you see much colder over the next couple of days, almost 10 degrees below average, and then a slow transition back towards average by early next week, probably around Monday, Tuesday. You can see, though, it is a slow transition, and fortunately, in the meantime, the next 4 or 5 days look fairly bone dry for London, and that'll be the same for most areas. The only higher risk is perhaps through Scotland, where we see some convective showers, at least initially, and maybe a bit more persistent precipitation into the weekend. You can see, though, as we head into the second half of next week, upper air temperatures go above average and precipitation really picks up, and this is where we see the battle between high pressure and lower pressure, and that will decide whether we see these milder drier runs or these slightly cooler but still probably mild with the southerly wind direction and wetter runs. And if we do look at this mean sea level pressure, you can see there is a little bit of distortion here. The runs that are around 1020, 1030, those are more the higher end. One's 1010, 1000 millibars are more on the lower end. So we haven't got a massive spread, but we've got enough of a spread which could be the deciding factor between slightly wetter conditions and slightly drier conditions. And you can see for Glasgow, if we go further northwards, it will most likely be a bit more disparity. As you can see here, some more higher pressure runs and also some more lower pressure runs. So more likely to be a bit more of a disparity further westwards, and that's where the uncertainty is higher. But for all areas, we do have this risk. And finally, if we look at the latest ECMWF ensembles, broadly very similar. Drier over the coming days, temperatures well below average, then trend above average next week. And there is a little bit of uncertainty over the, as I said, high pressure, low pressure position. But at the moment, it looks fairly unsettled, but at least it is looking milder. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you wrap up warm in the coming days with the cold air moving in. And I'll see you again for another video soon.